So while I'm not going to review The Amazing Digital Circus until the 9th episode finally comes out, there are two things about this show that I really want to address, and one of those things is Pomni's design. Now, with each and every character in The Amazing Digital Circus, the entire point of their design is supposed to be representative of their personality. Whether that's their base personality traits, their flaws as a person, or their insecurities. Ragatha is a ragdoll because she's a people pleaser and allows other people to walk all over her. Gangle is a comedy mask because she's sad and she hides her emotions, and she's made out of ribbons because she has no grounding to make her stand up for herself. Kinger is a king chess piece because he's very vulnerable and needs to be protected while remaining the most important character on the board. Zooble has body dysmorphia, and Jax is a character that deserves his own video. But a lot of people are constantly confused of why Pomni is a jester. She's not funny, she doesn't really hide herself behind humor, and she's really grounded as a character for such a silly looking design. The most common theory that I keep coming across says that she's a jester because she constantly feels like a joke that nobody takes seriously. She feels small and insignificant to where everybody around her keeps treating her like a child. And while I don't think that any of those theories are wrong, I actually think they're pretty spot on. I think they're only really covering half of it. Like, I do genuinely agree with the idea that Pomni does not know how to take herself seriously and constantly sees herself as nothing more than a living joke to the people around her. But while those are her fears and insecurities, there is a second layer that everybody misses. Pomni does not realize her own personal strengths. The modern idea of a jester is the image of a guy who constantly goes around telling jokes and making a fool of himself in order to make everybody else happy. But Pomni doesn't really do that. She doesn't really tell many jokes, and she doesn't work her ass off trying to make everybody else happy. That's more of Ragatha's thing. No, the real reason that Pomni is a jester is because of the subtextual reason that a jester existed. That was to calm everybody down. Something a lot of people really miss about historical jesters is that they weren't there just to make jokes. They were there to calm the king down whenever he was making a really big decision. Jesters existed during times of war, and they only showed up in the courtroom whenever they needed everybody to be grounded. They went around telling jokes and being an idiot, that way everybody in the room had their anxiety level drop dramatically. And it was very common in history that the jester was the person that usually gave you real talk. And there were even moments in history that were actually recorded where the jester was the one to tell the king off, just like with Pomni. Throughout the show, Pomni is constantly the character that goes around helping people with their issues just by being a listening ear. She's even the character that ends up being in the room whenever somebody's about to abstract and ends up saving them. She was the one to save Gangle whenever she was about to abstract. She accidentally saved Jax, and is one of the few people that treats Kinger with respect. And she has a habit whenever it comes to calling people out for their bullshit, specifically Jax and Kane. I believe that Pomni is a jester because she doesn't recognize this about herself. She continues to have this belief that nobody in the room actually respects her, whenever in reality, especially in episode 8, everybody respects her. In episode 8, she finally takes charge of the entire group and is the one to finally call Kane out to his face. And in these moments, finally, nobody in the room is actually treating her insignificantly. Everybody has eyes on her and everybody's willing to listen. Even Jax, who again needs his own separate video.
I can't tell if Jax was just like shamed and embarrassed in front of his peers, or if he was like molested somehow.
Wait, excuse me, what?
The like ripping off of the exterior and the way he's holding it leads me to believe this is like maybe an SA story, but I can't tell.
Look, I love Danny Mata. Danny Mata is awesome. Anybody who I know loves Danny Mata, but at the same time, Danny, what the fuck? Danny, I think you need to take a break from Hazbin Hotel, because I honestly have no idea how you made the connection that this scene was a metaphor for being SA'd. Nothing about Jax and his story implies that kind of backstory. In my mind, in order to come to that conclusion about that metaphor, you'd have to forget everything about Jax. The one thing about Jax that you have to keep in mind when analyzing his character is that everything about him is a facade. Jax was trapped in a digital world with his friends, and both of those friends basically died. So in order to cope, he put on the persona of a guy who doesn't give a shit and everything is a joke to him. To quote him, he is the funny guy in the group who breaks the fourth wall, and he chooses to believe the idea that everybody else has their own role within a narrative, making a whole deal about how every single person in the group fits a certain stereotype and character, only for everybody in the episode to break that character character and show that Jax is wrong. And whenever Jax is confronted with the lie, he starts to backpedal and starts to break down, giving easily one of the cringiest speeches I've ever seen a character give. But it serves the purpose that shows us that Jax is a character constantly fighting for control and he's losing it. Because the second that he loses that control, he has to face the consequences of everything that he's done. And if he has to face the consequences, then the facade breaks and he's no longer safe. So Danny, this is not a metaphor for somebody being SA'd. It's a metaphor for Jax being afraid of everybody seeing who he really is. A down on his luck loser who has no control over his life and is easily pushed around by his peers. Again, Danny, I say all of this 100% respectfully, mainly because I really liked your content. And originally, I was just gonna leave this to my John-chan reaction and then move on. But then I looked up online and people agree with this theory, which, yeah, I find very problematic. Jax is genuinely a very interesting and complex character that I really love. So forgetting his entire deal and thinking that he's a victim of SA is very uncomfortable to me because that's not what his character is meant for. Being a victim of SA is a massive character development feat that nobody should take lightly. So I see people going and throwing around that theory so casually as a very irresponsible thing to do. Characters can be dark with their backstories without it having to involve SA. And this weird rise of people constantly thinking that that's what makes a character interesting is very disturbing to me. Again, Danny, all of this is respectful and I do not actually blame you for this. I'm just here to tell you that no, that wasn't a metaphor for SA and people really need to stop thinking that it was. Yeah, let's talk about that because artistic intent has been under fire a lot lately. Now, I've made myself clear whenever it comes to my stance on what artistic intent should imply and where does artistic intent end and start. I believe that we should stick to the book whenever it comes to Frankenstein and Jekyll and Hyde. I think people should actually read and understand the original book before making an adaptation. I think more people should be reading the classics because there's a lot of stuff in those books that we are missing out on today. And I have been saying for years that art is not inherently political, which is a take that is still under fire recently. But there's still the question of where does artistic intent start and end whenever it comes to separating the art from the artist. Because sometimes whenever it comes to that artistic intent, you can obviously make an argument that the environment and the opinions of that artist influence the creation of the art whether or not it's intentional. And that upsets some people because some people just want to enjoy the artwork without actually thinking about the politics. And I'm here to say you can absolutely do that. It all depends on one question that everybody is ignoring. Because when you're making that statement about a piece of art, whether or not that's a book, a movie, a painting, or a song, you have to clarify how much of that political ideology was actually involved in the creation process. Because you have obvious examples like H.P. Lovecraft, who does not hide his racism whenever it comes to his books. But then you dog on people like J.K. Rowling, who you claim is transphobic even though Harry Potter has nothing to do with trans people. I don't care what she said about trans people, whether that was positive, negative, or neutral. Nothing about it is involved in the creation of Harry Potter. But then you go backwards and start ignoring the statement of the artist whenever it comes to Lord of the Rings. Because everybody keeps saying that this is an allegory for World War II, even though Tolkien himself literally stated that it wasn't. And then it gets hilarious because then there's pieces of art everybody forgot was political at one point. Steve Ditko's The Question was originally an objectivist in his first appearance. The guy had a black and white morality and did not believe in gray areas whenever it came to why somebody commits crime. And this was spelled out in the original narratives constantly because Steve Ditko was an objectivist. But nowadays, we forget that part about his character because that's no longer his writing. So, is The Question a political character anymore? Or is he the funny guy in the blue suit who listens to pop music and goes through people's trash? Look, all I'm saying is that every single time I see somebody make this kind of argument, whether or not they're for it or against it, it's constantly inconsistent of what the argument applies to. I am not kidding with this. There are people in this very comment section who are saying that Teletubbies is political. Again, as always, you have the right to disagree with me on this take, but I'm still gonna make my stance. Whether or not you separate the art from the artist is completely up to the individual, not the majority. You can't just join a mob and start judging other people's enjoyment of media and saying that their version of it is wrong. Especially when in the same breath you're saying that artistic intent and intent of the author doesn't actually exist. Art can be political sometimes, especially if the artist intended it to be political. But if the artistic intent is not there whenever it comes to the creation process, then you have no right to make that argument. I value audience interpretation as much as the next guy, but whenever it overrides artistic intent, that's whenever I start having a problem. Gooseworks got under fire because she stated who the main characters were in the Amazing Digital Circus. And people got pissed at her for that, even though she's the creator of the show. If anybody has the right to make that kind of judgment claim, it's her. As always, you can absolutely separate the art from the artist, but whenever you're actively ignoring the artistic intent and the statement of the creator, then I don't think you're actually here to enjoy the artwork. You're here because you have an agenda and you want to use that artwork to push that agenda, which is disrespectful to the art, that's disrespectful to the artist, and that's disrespectful to the audience. Art is made in order to express an opinion or a feeling or some kind of idea that the person has in their head. So making a generalized statement that all art is political or whether or not someone's intention with their own artwork isn't valid is a horrible take that you should be ashamed of because it limits artistic expression and freedoms. Art exists as an expression and that is the only thing that it's meant for. And actively trying to limit that expression by claiming that your take on the artwork overrides the creator really shows why the fuck you're actually here. Oh boy, you guys are trying to make me piss you off. Look, there's a reason why I don't talk about new-gen anime, and that's mainly because of two reasons. One is because I use this account to talk about classic literature and how it's misunderstood in the modern day, and two is because I really hate this shit. JJK, can't stand it. Demon Slayer, fucking hate it. Attack on Titan, oh boy, do I despise that one. Okay, in all fairness, it's not all bad. There are some genuine good ones that I love and adore to this day, with plots, characters, and themes that I actually want to see explored. But for every Mob Psycho 100, we have a Tokyo Ghoul. For every My Hero Academia, we have a Chainsaw Man. And to every Frieren to Journey's End, we have Jujutsu fucking Kaisen. These really are the types of shows that make me not want to be in the anime space. Overly complicated power systems that try to justify themselves in order to try to have stakes. Bullshit character deaths that mean nothing and just end a character arc abruptly. And over-the-top blood and violence that is so unnecessarily gory that there is no other reason to it outside of seeing how fucked up you can get before the censors kick in. Tell me, exactly what was the point of Nanami dying? What purpose did his death serve in actually forwarding the narrative? Name me one personality trait of any of Tanjiro's family members. Yes, Nezuko counts. What purpose did it serve for the narrative to kill off Potato Girl, outside of a shock death that fridges a character in order to serve a bullshit theme? What was the point of any of this? Look, I'm not against over-the-top violence whenever it serves a purpose in the story. Hellsing Ultimate is one of my favorite shows ever, but that's because the blood and violence actually serves a purpose in the narrative and the theme of the show, with each character death actually having a reason behind it because it either serves the character arcs or is respected by the narrative. I don't get that with shit like this. With these shows, the violence is just a means to an end and the character deaths are just there for shock value. Before, we had shows that actually respected the characters, with each bad development in the narrative being a stepping stool on their stairway to greatness. With these shows, the hardships that somebody went through acted as an opportunity for growth. But new-gen writers just saw that and didn't make the connection of why that worked. Instead, falling for the trap of the biggest rookie mistake that you can make as a writer, trauma equals character development. Yeah, that's not how that works. Treating your characters as nothing more than a prop for the narrative and themes is going to make the audience very emotionally confused. Because whenever trauma is basically running the show to where even the villains are getting tragic backstories to try to get some extra sadness in, even though literally 2 minutes ago they were slaughtering innocents like it was a high score with no remorse, any audience member that's actually paying attention is going to look back at your story and ask themselves, what the fuck was the point? Especially whenever most of these shows end it with half the cast getting killed off, which makes me beg the question of why the hell I got invested in all these characters whenever they were all just gonna die anyway. Because the majority of these shows are not like Death Note where killing off the main character is actually poetic because of how the story was set up from the start. Instead, it's just here to raise the stakes and make the ending seem more sad. To which, I'm sorry, I don't find that interesting. Again, if you like this stuff, all the more power to you, go enjoy it and ignore my opinion. Just don't expect me to back you up whenever you start to praise this shit like it's high art. Because there's a reason why I'm so obsessed with the classics. And it's the same reason why this channel exists in the first place. Okay, so I've already made my thoughts clear on why I don't like JJK, but what are my thoughts on the character of Mahito? Because whenever you get down to it, he's kind of the perfect antagonist for a shonen anime. With shonen anime, you constantly see the represented ideal that all human life is valuable, whether or not that's a painful life or a pleasurable life. All life is sacred no matter what, and all human beings have value. And the main character of JJK, Yuji Itadori, is the embodiment of that. Being a character whose only mission is to value that life and fight for it even whenever somebody else can't fight for themselves. And fortunately, JJK was smart enough to find out what the ultimate arch nemesis of that ideal would be, by making Mahito an existential nihilist. Being the embodiment of humanity's fear of itself, Mahito exists as a slap in the face of the idea of empathy. He genuinely believes that nothing matters and that no life is sacred, therefore he can go around and do whatever the hell he wants and no one can stop him. So whenever Yuji shows up with his exact opposite morality, Mahito sees that as an opportunity to challenge himself, seeing Yuji as the ultimate test of his own morality that says that I need to break this kid before I kill him, that way I can prove myself right. Only for that to end up backfiring sporadically whenever he finally meets Sukuna and suddenly starts fearing for his own life, turning him into the ultimate hypocrite as he turns around and runs away, showing that either his nihilism was nothing more than a front or his nihilism was hypocritical from the start. This is great. It's a great villain, it's a great antithesis, it's a great philosophy argument with a perfect third act breakdown that takes down the villain in a very satisfying manner. So with all this perfect build up, why do I think that Mahito falls short as a villain? Well, 3 reasons. One is that he's just there for way too long. While there is constant plot happening throughout the show, Mahito's role in that show is very repetitive. Like, the second that he shows up, you know what he's gonna do. He's gonna show up, kill a bunch of people, mock Itadori, and probably kill one of his friends. Which leads me to my second problem with him: he doesn't really grow as a character. Having a character represent the ideal of a philosophical argument is a good idea, but you have to allow that argument to shift and grow. Mahito doesn't really do that. From beginning to end, his argument still stays the exact same with no change in the wording. With his entire rivalry with Yuji Itadori being the purpose to challenge himself, he doesn't really get challenged. His philosophy never really adapts or grows, therefore he never goes into the next step. All he does is just get more powerful and therefore more sadistic. Think about characters like Pain from Naruto or Kaido from One Piece. While still keeping the main cores of their philosophies, they still have to face and adapt to new truths that the story brings to them, while still being able to be proven wrong later. Which segues into my final point about Mahito: the story doesn't really prove him wrong. If anything, it glorifies his philosophy. The show of JJK constantly has a really bad habit of killing off characters for no reason. It may have Yuji constantly preach about how all life is sacred, but the story does not back him up on that. Characters still die for no reason, and the streets are still paved with blood every other weekend. So the show can paint Mahito as the main villain who needs to be proven wrong all at once, but the narrative of the show doesn't really support that idea. Again, I like Mahito whenever it comes to his beginning and his ending, but it's that middle part that really ruins him as a character. I like him conceptually, but his execution just fell flat for me a little bit too much. Hey guys, I'm almost at 5,000 followers and I really want to hit that number so I can start growing and doing other things on this channel. So if you like my content, please consider giving me a follow, like, share, and repost, and check out my link tree to my Cash App to help support me and my buddies. Even if it's just $1, everything helps.
Yo, people in my comment section are pointing out the fact that people forgave Vegeta, but they're not forgiving Omni-Man. And it's low-key making me realize that Nolan is a better written Vegeta.
Oh, wow, yeah, I don't agree with that. Look, you can like both characters, but there is no argument that you can make that says that Nolan is a better written Vegeta. Don't get me wrong, I'm not knocking Nolan as a character. I do think that he's decently written. But I'm sorry, there is no beating this. Time and time again, we constantly see Vegeta become a better person and try to atone for his mistakes. From protecting his son to avenging his son, to actually fulfilling the promises to his son, from self-sacrifice to helping out Topple, to everything that he's doing on New Namek. Vegeta is a guy who fought for one reason and only that reason, and then that reason crumbled and was destroyed over and over and over again right in front of his face. And we repeatedly see him go through an internal struggle trying to fight for that reason, and it still fails. To the point where he has an internal monologue in the Buu Saga describing the entire process that he went through. Because Goku was better than him in every single way, and he didn't get why. And it isn't until the end of that monologue does he conclude that Goku is better than him and fully admits that to himself. And after that, he spends his entire life just constantly trying to be a better person than what he was. From being a better husband, to being a better father, to being a better person overall that's actually compassionate. And all of this was shown to us over 20 years of storytelling, which is a luxury that Nolan just doesn't have. Nolan doesn't get 20 years of storytelling that goes into detail of what he did wrong wrong and trying to find ways to atone for that. All he gets is a bunch of comics and 4 seasons of a TV show. And because his plotline is a lot more complicated with him being in a war with the Viltrumite Empire, he doesn't really get a lot of moments to actually atone for his sins. The only thing that the story is able to give him is just the ability to say sorry, and that's it. And not to mention that his crimes are way worse than Vegeta whenever it comes to the audience, because his crimes are on a personal level. Because Vegeta didn't try to kill his own son. Vegeta didn't go around murdering all of his closest comrades that he treated like friends for several decades. Vegeta didn't say that his wife was the equivalent of a pet, and then run away to go start another family only for that family to die, and then he has to drop a kid on that ex-wife. Yeah, an audience isn't going to easily forgive all that. I'm not saying it's impossible, Nolan still can redeem himself to the audience, but it's not gonna be an easy fight. Because if there's one massive difference between Vegeta and Nolan whenever it comes to their crimes, is that at least Vegeta was honest every step of the way. Nolan wasn't.
You want to know what your big mistake was, Black? What mistake? It's that stolen body! Every muscle, every cell! His body was built from a lifetime of intense battles! But you took it! It's all second-hand! You feel the power in those Saiyan cells, but you don't truly understand it! Because you didn't build it! And you'll never learn to think like that clown!
You know what? I actually want to jump back on this because there's something about this argument that just did not sit right with me. Why the fuck were these two compared? Because outside of the idea that both of them have caused planetary genocide, they have literally nothing to compare. Let's look at the original argument. The original argument said that audiences were able to forgive Vegeta more than they were able to forgive Omni-Man. And while I did just make a video talking about why that was, that doesn't change the fact that this was an unfair comparison in the first place. Because these two's crimes are completely different. The only similarities between these two is that both of them have a family, both of them caused planetary genocide, and both of them have done that in the name of an empire. But that's where the similarities stop, because the rest of this comparison is completely unfounded. That being that Vegeta was 100% aware and honest about what he was doing the entire time. Nolan's crimes was betraying everybody. Vegeta was honest about who he was, why he was doing everything, and what he was doing from the beginning. His arc is about coming down from being a violent psychopath and finding a new reason to fight. Because he found somebody who is better than him and he didn't understand why, and his entire arc is trying to find out what that reason was. People were able to forgive Vegeta because none of his crimes were personal. Whenever he does fuck around and find out until somebody gets pissed off at him, the story itself punishes him for it. The worst things that Vegeta does on a personal level is abandon Bulma whenever he finds out that she's pregnant, and that one time whenever he allowed Cell to absorb Android 18. And both times were 100% expected from his character. Compare that to Nolan, whose crimes were way worse. Nolan got married, started a family, became a superhero, and swore to protect Earth for several years. He built up trust with every single person around him for several decades, only to betray all of that trust in one day by again killing all of his closest friends that he knew for several years, abandoning his wife and calling her a pet, admitting that he was a sleeper agent getting Earth ready for a global invasion, and tried to push his son to become part of that invasion. Son that he then tried to murder. Yeah, put these two side to side and tell me that their crimes are basically the same. Because Vegeta never lied to anybody. Nolan became a superhero, got a family, made friends, made bonds, and made an entire community of superheroes, knowing full well the entire time that he was about to destroy all of it in just a couple of decades. Literally betraying all of these people that put so much trust in him as the #1 superhero. Yeah, no, this was an unfair comparison that should never have happened. Aside from the genocide, I don't see a comparison. Peter Parker's Spider-Man is actually fucking terrifying. Now, I'm not talking about his clones, his variants, or any kind of Elseworld story. I'm talking about main timeline Peter Parker. Because I'm 100% convinced that if it wasn't for that power and responsibility speech that Ben gave him, he would have murked the entire Marvel Universe on his own. Look, I love Peter Parker's Spider-Man. I think he's one of the greatest superheroes of all time, akin to Marvel's Superman. But there are moments that he has in the comics that I just say, man, I'm glad that he's a good guy. For instance, there's this guy from the Clone Saga named Kane. Kane is a serial killer. He's also a clone of Peter, meaning that he has all of Peter's powers. And his main method to kill somebody is to take his hand, put it on your face, turn on the wall sticking ability, and then yank back and pull your face off. And the pain of him doing that is usually so excruciating that you die on the spot from it. And while you might be saying, oh, well, that's just one of his clones, Peter Parker would never actually do that. No, Peter knows how to do this, and he's done it before. His most successful attempt being on Kraven's wife. And he only did that because that was after Kraven grave and buried him alive. Yeah, whenever Peter's pushed to his limit and is kind of 100% done with everybody else's bullshit, he kind of stops fucking around. Like in the comic run Spider-Man Ends of the Earth, where the Sinister Six is on the top of their game whenever it comes to their bullshit, that Spider-Man has to take Sandman and torture him for information. What about that time whenever Aunt May got shot and Peter went straight to Kingpin and beat the crap out of him, ending the fight saying that if Aunt May doesn't pull through, he's gonna come back and shoot webbing down his throat, literally claiming that clogging up his entire respiratory system will take 3 seconds. Seriously, do not piss off Peter Parker, because there is a time and limit whenever he's done with your horse crap that he's not playing with you anymore. Another example, you know the black suit? Yeah, sure you do. Obviously, everybody knows the black suit. In the original arc, one of his main tipping points that he was going too far is whenever he almost killed a supervillain. This is usually a sign that the symbiote is fully taken over and Peter is no longer in control. Whenever really, no, that was Peter doing that. All the symbiote did was drop his inhibitions and push him to go that far. My proof being that he still has a black suit. No, it's not the symbiote anymore. He got rid of that and gave that to Eddie. No, this is a cloth one that he made himself to replicate the original and that he wears actively to show supervillains, hey, I'm not being funny anymore. And again, that's coming from a guy who has the capability to punch Scorpion's jaw off. Again, you want that guy coming after you while wearing a symbol of what he's able to do with you whenever he's done fucking around? I don't think so. Peter Parker is a scary motherfucker. Be glad that he's a good guy. Hey guys, I know I've been on hiatus recently, but I want to jump back in here real quick just because of the recent news, because I'm really excited for this movie. I am so happy that they're making this movie and that it's basically finished. But as most of you know, the entire movie was recently leaked. Not snippets, not clips, the entire film was leaked online, and I'm not happy about it. And I just want to come on here to address my followers that if any of you are one of the people that watched that movie, unfollow me. I am not joking, being facetious, or sarcastic. I am not kidding in the slightest. If you are one of the people that actually watched this entire movie due to the leak, I want you to unfollow me right now. This is a film dedicated to a franchise that everybody's been waiting to see for goddamn years, with animation, voice acting, and a storyline that I am sure is going to blow us away. But the movie wasn't set to release until October later this year, and I'm not watching it until then, because I respect the artists that made this movie and I want to help give them the paycheck that they deserve. From the clips that I've been forced to see through internet osmosis, I can safely say that this movie has some of the best ever being put behind it. And unlike the one asshole who leaked this shit, I want to make sure that that is respected. No, I will not be watching this movie until the official release date. And if you are one of the people that watched this leaked film in its entirety, I want you off my page, never to return. Hit the unfollow button and start respecting artistic craft. What is this? Wait, isn't that from that new game? What is she doing? Oh. Oh no. Oh no. Do you realize what you've just done? Because now you've given me a life's mission to die protecting that thing. You just made it 100% certainty that me and 1,000 other men are not making it home to our families tonight. For my entire life, I have hated children, and now you've given me a daughter. And now I'm being put in a position where I can safely say that if something happens to this child, I will kill every single person in the room and then myself. How did you do that? She's not even human. How am I this attached? I would give this girl the world if I can. And I have no idea if that happens in the game or not because I haven't even played it yet. And after watching these clips, god damn it do I want to, because now I want to spoil the fuck out of this thing. Look at her, she's perfect. I don't give a shit about the story or the gameplay. All I care about is this little girl. This cute, innocent, precious little girl. Where can I even get this game? Found it. Shut up and take my money. Just give me my fucking daughter. I have war crimes to commit. You got me.
Yeah! I did it! Check! Back off. Out of my way.
Whoever the fuck is calling this girl a clanker, I will block you. For those who haven't got the memo, that is our daughter and she will be treated like the princess that she is. How dare you compare her to those filthy wire backs? I will not stand idly by as somebody goes around throwing slurs at my little girl. To the next person who calls this girl a clanker, I will make D-Day look like a cakewalk. I said last time that I had war crimes to commit and you will become my next target. So do yourself a favor and sit down, shut up, and give this girl a goddamn balloon. alone. Call this girl a clanker and I will make John Wick look like he was on easy mode. Well, this is gonna be really fun. I've said for years on my personal time that I think that Batman supervillains act best whenever they're treated like horror monsters. And apparently James Gunn agrees with me because holy shit. Personally, I would have gone for Two-Face or Killer Croc for the horror movie, but hey, Clayface ain't a bad idea. I do actually agree with them with the idea that Clayface's backstory is straight out of a horror movie. And hey, apparently they have a lot of passion in this project because the second that the screenplay was done, they immediately greenlit it. Now, I will admit there are some concerns in the back of my head regarding the writer and the director, but hey, we've had good movies come out of bad directors before. And I'll admit, I'm not really sure how this movie's gonna work without a Batman figure in it, but hey, let's see what happens. Now, I will admit, I'm not really that big of a fan of body horror personally, because a lot of body horror doesn't really have a point to it outside of being gross and disgusting. But here, the body horror is clearly going to be tied to the theme about losing your identity, so I'm really excited to see how they pull that off. Going in blind and only seeing the teaser trailer, I'm gonna say that this movie can absolutely be pulled off if they focus on that theme of losing your identity. So long as they keep to the structure of a character study, I think that this could be a really good film. However, if this goes in the direction of, say, The Bride or the Joker movies, then I'm gonna start having problems. I don't really want this movie to be a commentary on society, I just want the character study. And so long as they keep on track and actually demonize the harsh parts of reality that should be demonized instead of glorifying them, then this movie has a lot of potential whenever it comes to the commentary. Granted, I will admit that this teaser trailer is very generic, but the idea behind it is something that I'm really excited for. So for now, I'm just gonna hold out hope until the actual trailer comes out, and just hope for the best until the final release. God damn it, now I want a Two-Face movie! As excited as I am about the new Clayface movie that's coming out, I'm not gonna lie, there is a small part of me that really wishes that this was a Two-Face movie. Now, granted, that is due to the fact that I am a massive fan of Two-Face, mainly because I'm a massive fan of Jekyll and Hyde. But I'm not gonna lie, whenever I see this kind of trailer with the Nolan version of Two-Face, there was a part of me that really wishes that we got this movie instead. Granted, the Nolan version of Two-Face does not have multiple personality disorder, and that's mainly one of the reasons why I love him so much, to the point where I might even say that he's on par, if not almost better than the animated one. But imagine the psychological horror that you can do with a character like Two-Face. Either with the multiple personalities or not, Two-Face has always been a psychological horror character. And as excited as I am over the Clayface movie treating Clayface like the horror movie monster that he deserves to be, I'm not gonna lie, it kinda feels like easy mode compared to what we can have in a Two-Face movie. Would it be able to outperform the Nolan version? Absolutely not, I don't think so. In my opinion, there is no beating that version of Two-Face outside of maybe the animated one. But come on, wouldn't it be interesting though? Like, say that I'm wrong in this kind of statement, but I do think that Two-Face can work without a Batman figure. Now, do I think that he should work without a Batman figure? No, absolutely not. But I'm not gonna lie, he'd work a lot better without a Batman than Clayface would. Ultimately, in the end, I'm just glad that we're not getting a Joker movie again, because I've seriously had enough of this goddamn clown. Oh, with great fucking pleasure. Listen, I love Tommy Lee Jones. I like Tim Burton as a director and a producer, and I do think that Schumacher can be a good director. So with all three of these great, amazing, talented people at the helm writing a character as complex and as interesting as Two-Face, how did you fuck this up? Clueless. Like, getting the acting out of the way real quick, Tommy Lee Jones is an amazingly talented person. Like, before they even started filming this movie, he just won an award for The Fugitive. Like, the guy was known for playing characters that were grounded and realistic, which makes it so confusing of why he decided to emulate the acting skills of somebody he fucking hated.
I hate you. And he said, I cannot sanction your buffoonery.
But then there's the biggest offender, which is the writing of this version of Two-Face, which is so bad that I don't think there's any kind of actor that can salvage this kind of character. For context, this movie was written literally 1 year later after the two-parter episode dedicated to Two-Face in the animated series. So whenever it came to their interpretation of the character, they had a perfect blueprint and example on how to do this character right, sitting right in front of them. And at the beginning of the movie, it seems like they're gonna play it straight. He's calm and collected, he's monologuing, and he's making a big deal about the two sides of justice.
One man is born a hero, his brother a coward. Babies starve, politicians grow fat, holy men are martyred, and junkies grow legion.
Like, this is good stuff. He's actually doing a really good job, but then you give it a few seconds and... Like, maybe you could put all the blame on the studios for constantly pushing this movie to have a more kid-friendly edge. But I'm sorry, if the fucking children's cartoon is giving us a character that's more mature than this, that's a big sign that you know you fucked up. Like, he's not even consistent whenever it comes to what his character is supposed to be. Like, the whole thing with Two-Face is that he constantly flips a coin because he believes that there is no thing such as justice. He was a man that believed in order, and constantly controlling that order was a good thing, but then the order fell and his life fell apart, so he believes that chaos is the only motivator. What you want doesn't matter because the dealer of the cards is the game of chance. But in this movie, he's repeatedly flipping the coin until he gets to the desired outcome that he wants, which is a spit in the face of what this character is supposed to be. Like, I wanted to go into this video saying that he played Harvey well, but he didn't play Two-Face right. But most of the scenes that he's in, he's messing around like a Mexican jumping being and making weird squawking noises. So I can't really say that he plays Harvey well because I don't know this version of Harvey. There is one scene in this movie where they actually explain his backstory, and it's treated like a side note. There are so many ways that you can take this character, but this movie is not it. Yeah, fuck this version of Two-Face. Thank God we got the Nolan version. Okay, that actually is something worth discussing. Because the idea that Two-Face is a split personality situation is only like half right, and also flipping the coin is also completely different in its symbolism on which version of Two-Face that you're talking about. Because here's the thing, whenever Two-Face was first introduced in Detective Comics number 66, he didn't have multiple personality disorder. He wasn't written with DID. No, the original idea of Two-Face having multiple personalities in his head was actually created by the animated series. Before that, he was just a guy with a fractured psyche. The original idea of him was being a good man who was turned into a criminal due to a tragic backstory. He was constantly fighting with himself with the flip of the coin whether or not he was going to have a sense of morality or be a complete gangster. In the simplest way I can put it, the original Two-Face was a villain with a moral code, with his morality system of ethics constantly being decided by a coin flip. But with the evolution of storytelling over time and the idea of psychology creeping into characterization, the idea of Two-Face having a duality system in his mind down to the point of a split personality was a great prompt that a lot of people wanted to keep pushing. But here's the thing, the idea of Two-Face having a split personality is only canon to specific stories. So you have things like the animated series, the Gotham TV show, and the Arkham games giving him a split personality, which reinforces the idea that that's the canon version of Two-Face. But here's the thing, I can name off a lot more stories where that is not the case. Faces, Batman Year One, Batman Victory, All-Star Batman, the Nolan films. All of these stories have special places in certain Batman canons, and none of them give Harvey a split personality. Even stories like The Long Halloween. In the animated movie, they push the idea of Two-Face having a split personality with Big Bad Harv talking to Harvey. They even add in new plot points where Harvey is constantly blacking out and does not remember certain events. But here's the thing, that was not in the original comic. They added that in as a new red herring for the movie. That wasn't in the original story. In my opinion, the most canon version of Two-Face is a man who believed in law and order so much that he stared chaos in the face but lost. Whether or not that's because of the law failing, the supervillains got too strong, or the mafia got to him, the turn from Harvey Dent to Two-Face is mostly due to a complete loss of control. Control over his life, the criminals, the law, the city, and himself. Harvey Dent was a district attorney that used the law as a tool in order to make things better and get control of a situation. And his descent into becoming the villain Two-Face is because in a very important moment of his life, the law failed him. Order, control, and making your own odds was no longer a viable option because it didn't work out. And the conclusion that he was forced to come to was that order did not exist, it was all up to chance. So his new goal became to control the city through the criminal underworld and become the top dog by beating the criminals at their own game at the cost of a coin flip. Because with Harvey, you can't control the odds anymore. It always just comes down to whether or not you called heads or tails.
It's time, Harvey. It's time.
So Nikos wants to know, what was the first vampire and what started the myth? Well, that's kind of hard to answer because there was no first vampire. Going all the way back to Mesopotamia and ancient Greece, I can technically say the character of Lilith was the first vampire, because she was an otherworldly being that stalked people at night and drained their life force. I can also claim that about the idea of a succubus because that was technically the same thing. All throughout ancient history, you can find myths, monsters, creatures, and cryptids that all have something that relates to a vampire. But in order to answer your question properly, I want to say that the original idea of a vampire didn't really start until like medieval Europe, mainly due to two things. One was because in 1700 Serbia, we finally get the first term that eventually became the word vampire, and that term was being used to describe a new monster that was basically the culmination of all those ancient elements. And the myth about this monster was actually caused by a real-world situation, because at the time of the 1700s, for a multitude of different factors, either education or because they were fucked up, a bunch of people were starting to dig up grave spots. And apparently, people in the area just did not have notes on what the body did whenever it was decomposing. So to them, they saw a dead body as it was trying to decompose, but it still looked alive. Like the body was still intact, but now it was fucked up and looked wrong. So before they eventually came to the conclusion that this is what a body decomposing looks like, they thought that it was a dead person coming back to life. Add on to that there was a bunch of diseases going around like tuberculosis, rabies, and porphyria. A bunch of sicknesses that had visual side effects that looked a lot like the rotting corpses that they were digging up. So the idea of a vampire slowly evolved based on these real-world events while also being based on a bunch of myths and creatures that existed before. And after that, the idea of a vampire was born as a monster that stalks you at night and drinks your blood. But because of how new they were at the time, they were very malleable whenever it came to their powers and how they worked. Because you can technically say that the original vampire worked more like a modern-day zombie. But that's where all the inspiration from the old myths and creatures came in. Because as they were writing down the details of this creature and how it worked, they were starting to connect the dots to all those old monsters that I mentioned before. And the logical fallacy became that if these old monsters had these kind of traits, then that must transfer to this new one. Add on to that all the fear and hysteria that was creating new stories and new tall tales that added more powers to vampires. Which explains why vampires are so fucking overpowered. And then finally, we get into literacy. Because as the hysteria about this new monster started to grow, more writers and artists wanted to create new stories regarding it. So we have the vampire in 1748, the vampire from 1819, and Carmilla from 1872. Each was a really good story that added on to the vampire myth, but none of them really agreed on what the solidified version of a vampire was. Each created new versions of a vampire that added on more characterization and more ideas of what the monster looked like and how it acted. You couldn't really say any of them were the definitive version of a vampire. That is until 1897, whenever Bram Stoker finally releases Dracula. While also being an amazingly good book, the idea of a vampire was finally solidified in this one definitive version that everybody agreed on. Ask anybody who read it and they would never describe Dracula as just another vampire. They would say that he is the vampire. Not only was he the ultimate culmination of all the superpowers that vampires allegedly had, but he was an actual character with a supporting cast. Yes, we've had early literacy that had vampires as a villain, but none of them really had a character and a personality like Dracula did. Add on to that an intricate plot, a unique writing style, and a goth aesthetic that we've never seen before. This book was an amazingly written bestseller that changed the idea of a vampire moving forward. Every vampire that existed after Dracula always came back to referencing this book, and Dracula as a character finally became the first definitive vampire. Again, we've had creatures before this a long time ago in many different myths and stories, all tied to different myths, ideas, and fears that have plagued humanity for years. So while Dracula himself was not the first to do his kind of shtick, he was the first one to make it look good.